So hello and welcome to this second video on tier point runs. The first video is linked here and also in the description below. In that video we looked at what actually is a tier point run and how to find them. If you haven't watched that video, I'd recommend you do so before watching this video. And if you have watched that video, watch it again because I really need the views. So in this video we'll talk about how to optimize your run and also how to book it. In that first video we found a very interesting fare from Sofia to Las Vegas, baby, which was about £1,155. In this video I'll show you how to optimize that into a tier point run that yields 800 or perhaps even 880 tier points. So stick around!
Hi, I'm Matt. Over the last 25 years I've travelled a lot. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.3 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So hit subscribe to see where I go next and perhaps get some inspiration for your next trip.
To optimize a run you've found, you'll need to get to grips with Matrix Airfare Search from ITA software. This is another remarkable website that allows you to do amazing things, although it is a little more hardcore than Google Flights and takes a little more knowledge to navigate. Matrix is actually owned now by Google and is the engine behind Google Flights. So anything you found over there, you should find over here. You're presented with an entry screen and we'll work through the options as we go. You could of course start fishing for fares here rather than Google Flights, and if you had intel on a good fare from somewhere else that might make sense. So we'll keep it simple for now and we'll find the fare we're interested in. Pop in the info we know, select business class and above, convert the fare to GBP unless you're fluent in Bulgarian levs, click search, and there you go. The BA fare we found isn't actually the cheapest way of getting between those 2 cities in business class. That will give you some idea of the power of this tool. So click back and we'll add some more filters. Click on advanced controls and we'll get 4 additional boxes, and this is where we optimize. First of all, add Alliance One World to the outbound and return extension code boxes, then click search. There you go, £1,155. A few routing options are presented and prices do wobble by a few quid, which could be down to foreign exchange rates or to different taxes and fees added by the different airports you transit. You'll note that some travel via Dallas, but we know from the first video that transiting Dallas is unlikely to be efficient for tier points. So we found a fare that looks promising, but let's see what the adjacent days look like. Modify your search and leaving everything else the same, select the calendar of lowest fares option and search around the days you picked. Putting in a range of nights will yield the best results. Click search and bingo, even better options. The best is £1,007, which is really good. So that's 4 nights from the Wednesday, although you may give some of those savings back from having to stay longer at the turnaround point. I'm going to stick with the dates we originally found. So let's optimize, but first we need to talk about fare rules. This is as tedious as it gets, but it is quite important. If you click on the fare, you'll see the details of the flights involved and a breakdown of the fare itself. And within that, click again and you'll see the fare rules. These are lengthy, tedious, and I don't pretend to understand all of it. This is what you learn at travel agent school. You do need to be at least aware of sections 2, 5, 6, 8 and 9, and a hugely significant detail isn't in there at all, but I'll come back to that. Section 2 tells you the days you can travel. This fare, and most you'll be looking at, involve a Saturday night away and limits the days of the week that you can cross the Atlantic. If a fare disappears mid-optimization, it's maybe because one of these conditions has been broken. Section 5 shows advanced purchase rules. This one needs 180 days and many of the better fares will have this stipulation, so you do need to plan ahead. Section 6 states how long you need to be away. This fare requires a minimum of 24 hours at the turnaround point, and you can't start your return until the Sunday after arrival. That's the Saturday night rule in action. I've seen these without the 24-hour stipulation, but it's not a great hardship either way. Sections 8 and 9 cover stopovers and transfers, and this is a critical point. If you stop somewhere for more than 24 hours, this is called a stopover. A number of these may well be allowed, but they will charge you for the pleasure. The fees will be shown here. If you stop somewhere for less than 24 hours, it's called a transfer and it's free. You may well, of course, be happy to add a stopover for €600, because even by doing so, you may still end up with a very competitive fare. But doing so will move this away from being a tier point holiday. The rest of the fare rules can pretty much be ignored, except section 9. This section shows the number of transfers you can take and shows you're allowed 2 in Europe as well as 2 in North America. That is pretty standard, and it is how you get this routing up to 800 tier points. Taking advantage of these transfer rules is how you turn a tier point holiday into something potentially quite epic. On my trip to Phoenix that I talked about in my first video, I was able to add a 23-hour transfer in Las Vegas on the way out and a 23-hour transfer in San Francisco on my way back. If you've never been to those cities, then only being there for 23 hours might actually be quite irritating, as it doesn't give you long enough to really see anything of the city. But as I lived in San Diego for 4 years, I've been to both of those places very frequently, and stopping there for 23 hours gave me a great opportunity to reacquaint myself with those places, and it was really enjoyable to do so. So that's the guts of what you need to know from the fare rules, so let's get optimizing. Go back to the entry screen and select no limit on the extra stops, and make sure the 2 boxes are ticked. Change airport so it will offer Gatwick instead of Heathrow as an example, and only show available seats. There's nothing worse than finding a great fare and then finding there's no seats available. On the outbound routing box, let's add LHR, as we know we'll have to go through Heathrow. It shouldn't make much of a difference, and any difference you do see is because adding that constraint forces you onto direct flights from Vegas to Heathrow, and that probably impacts the taxes available. The fare movement isn't great though. From video 1, we know we need to transit the East Coast, as a direct flight from London to Vegas yields 140 tier points, while breaking it into 2 flights of 2,000 miles each yields 280. So add JFK both ways, remembering that the ordering of those legs is reversed on the way back. Same fare, give or take. So we're up to 80 plus 140 plus 140 each way, which is 720 in total. But we've only got 1 transfer in North America so far, and we're allowed 2, so let's add LAX. Bingo! Another 40 tier points each way, which takes us to 800 in total, with the fare only having moved by a few quid. A quick interlude. Looking at these fares, you'll see the New York to LA plane is an Airbus A321 Sharklets. This is quite important. This is a specifically configured plane heavy on premium seats. It has a first class cabin, which is reminiscent of an international first class product, and the business seats are lie flat in a 2-2 configuration. Paul Lucas recently reviewed this plane, and I'll link to his video in the description. These planes go back and forth from New York and Boston to LA and San Francisco, and occasionally also from LA to Miami. They are by far the best way of crossing the continent, particularly overnight. Or at least they were the best way. They still show up in these itineraries, but there is chatter about them being mothballed given the downturn in US domestic business travel. American Airlines is well known for shuffling planes and schedules, and you may well find yourself having to manage a schedule change after making a booking. If you are notified of a change, the best advice is to research your options and have your preferred flights to hand when calling to accept those changes. They are never going to offer you an itinerary that yields as many tier points as you could find on your own. If you don't get a Sharklets plane, you'll be on a traditional US domestic first class, as they call it, which will have a larger reclining armchair. These are still superior to many European business class seats, but you will find them uncomfortable if you have to travel overnight. So we're looking pretty good, but we've only got 1 transfer in Europe and we're allowed 2. Madrid and Helsinki are the obvious candidates, as they're within the one world universe. This is tricky and it may not work, so I recommend tinkering leg by leg to see what you can find. And it doesn't work on this occasion. Madrid, Barcelona, Helsinki, Amsterdam, Manchester, many of the usual suspects all break the fare. It's frustrating that you never know why. I think on this occasion it could be because the airline schedules are reduced and there just aren't flights that fit within the itinerary that you're optimising. The fact that you're not cascaded into another fare group and offered a higher fare supports this theory. But it can also be because of that hidden piece of information that I mentioned earlier, and don't worry, I haven't forgotten about it. A critical piece of information that doesn't show up in Matrix's software is the MPM, or the maximum permitted mileage. You can find this from other sources like Expert Flyer, but all fares have them, and it's the maximum mileage permitted on that fare, and it's often the reason why a fare itinerary breaks. Beware though, the mileage calculated per the airline system is often different to the mileage in the real world, and the system also gives you bonus miles for transiting certain airports, so it's pretty much impossible to reverse engineer. But the bottom line though is that if a fare doesn't work, it doesn't work. So it looks like the best we can do here is 800 tier points for £1,160, £1.45 each. Good, but not exceptional, but potentially a fun little holiday. Hello, future Matt here. So after filming this segment, I continued to tinker with the fare and did manage to get Helsinki and Madrid into this itinerary. So there will be a third video in this series where I'll show you what I did, and I managed to get this up to 920 tier points. But I wouldn't recommend anybody actually attempts that run because, well, I'll explain in the next video. I did then book a variant of that itinerary, and even though it's by no means certain that I'll be able to fly it, it did feel really good to be able to put something into the diary. Anyway, back to past me. You'll often see people booking fares to Hawaii, as it adds another 100 tier points each way as you substitute a domestic 40-point leg for a 140-point leg as you cross the Pacific. I couldn't find any good fares to show you, and it does make for quite a long trip, particularly as the planes that go out into the Pacific are usually not the best in the fleet. But if you can find it and you're happy to do it, a Honolulu flight should get you over 1,000 tier points in one trip. There's a lot more to Matrix that could make a third video in this tier point series. Let me know in the comments if you'd like any more advanced stuff. For example, you can show the flights as time bars, which can be really handy in visualizing the options. But before we move on, I need to show you one technique to force a 23-hour layover, which gives you that opportunity to have a great tier point holiday. To do this, you'll need to break the trip into a multi-city itinerary with the city you'd like to force a long transfer into as the middle stop of a leg, like this. Double check that the same fare pops out once you've split the trip into separate legs. Then add a semicolon and a min connect 1320 into the extension codes box. This will constrain the results to those meeting a minimum connection criteria in minutes. So here it's a minimum 22-hour connection, and voila! You can split the trip into 6 legs, which would also allow you to finesse the other connections or to pick a specific flight that you wanted to travel on. You can always click on the question mark beside the field to see some of the other options that are available to you. It is very powerful. So that's how you optimize a flight. So how do you book it? Well, again, there are 2 ways. The easiest, and the one I always use, is to call BA. Have the specific flights you want to hand, including the flight numbers and the fare codes, and they should be able to match it, even if it's an American Airlines flight number. Wait for their shock when they see the price that you've been able to achieve. The second way is to do it online. There is another very clever site called Book with Matrix, which takes an itinerary from Matrix and forces it into online booking engines. You need to be on this page, then Control A to select the whole page, Control C to copy it, and then Control V to paste it into the Booking with Matrix site, and voila! It will find booking engines that will make the booking. Pretty clever. Prices may move slightly and it will generally get priced in US dollars, but it is really clever. If you pick American Airlines, you will then be able to book through their site. You may need to use a fake zip code to force a non-US credit card to work, but you should get it to work. Living in the UK though, I prefer to just call British Airways and talk to a human. And if they try to charge you the booking fee for using the telephone service, challenge them to find this fare through the BA website. One more important point before I finish. The flight will end in your departing city, which in this case is Sofia. Then you'll have to get back to where you live. It may be tempting to just drop that last leg to Sofia, leave the airport at Heathrow and just go home. Doing so will lose you that last 40 or 80 tier points, as I've said before, you need to fly in order to earn the tier points. But you will save the cost of getting back home, which may offset the loss of the tier points. And I can tell you from experience that it is a real pain to get on a plane that is leaving London when you've just got off 3 or 4 back-to-back flights that have gotten you there. But don't drop the last leg. Doing so is technically a breach of the conditions of carriage. And BA is within its rights to bill you the fare difference between what you paid and the itinerary that you actually took, which will almost always be significant. They also have the right to throw you out of the executive club and seize your avios. But they almost certainly won't, and people miss flights and skip legs every day for perfectly legitimate reasons. So if you do want to drop that last leg, remember that you won't be able to short check baggage to London, so it's best done if travelling hand baggage only. Or schedule a stopover or transfer that is overnight in London, which should be a valid reason to allow the gate agent to short check your bag. Or as another alternative, fly into Gatwick and out of Heathrow, because BA won't transfer your baggage between those flights, they'll give them back to you. But don't drop the last leg, unless you do. My compliance department should be happy with that. So there you go, how to optimise and book a tier point run. If you are still watching, please like this video. I think it's the least you can do. Please also comment and subscribe if you're new. I'll see you all again soon. Goodbye.